The National Fire Council has just introduced its new leadership framework, partly in replacement of the old personal qualities and attributes framework that has existed for some time, and also recognising that we're in a different era. We need to refresh some of the language. People need to understand more issues around well-being and inclusion, for instance, in their leadership behaviour. And we wanted to establish, in these more challenging times, a way of thinking about behaviour in organisations and a way of assessing that behaviour to make sure that everybody is working to their potential. Well, some of the behaviours that we're looking for within the framework, and it's really worthwhile recognising that we're talking about leadership behaviour from absolutely everybody. So it's not leadership as in your top team, it's firefighters, administration staff, comms teams, finance, you name it, and of course the front line. And everybody demonstrates leadership. So some of the behaviours that we're looking for, as always, will be about how people maintain their own well-being, how they're helping other people, how they listen, how they give good feedback, how they're looking across their environment to make sure that they're looking for those kind of problems that will get in the way, and how they make decisions. So some of the obvious things you'd expect to find around decision, around problem solving, but within a context of making sure that there's a real collaboration and a focus on each other looking after or the service and indeed themselves. This is really important for the sector. I think there's an expectation, obviously in a time when we have refreshed inspection arrangements, and an expectation from government around what we're going to demonstrate to our communities, that each service can work with its people to ensure that everything it's doing to its best capacity, and indeed that every single individual within that service is demonstrating their best skill, their best approach to different projects. So from there, what we're trying to do is frame a way of thinking about the behaviour that you need in that service to be able to achieve all those things you've got to be able to achieve. Some of the practical ways that you'd be thinking about using it, for instance, would be designing your own 360 appraisal, so you can use the behaviours as a base for that, so people can self-reflect and get peer feedback. Use it in development centres where you have 2-3 day exercises, and all of the base of your exercises that you're helping people to assess themselves against are using those behaviours. Individual feedback I find very, very useful to use a framework. We're able to sit with that person and say, where do you think you are? Where do I think you are? So you're framing some of that sometimes difficult debate with people, sometimes incredibly positive debate, so it allows for really good feedback. I think to a certain extent it also helps people recognise the kind of behaviours that are needed within different positions in the organisation, and if they're keen on promotion, it will help them start to develop their own activities towards reaching, again, their potential. Some services are doing these things really, really well. In fact, most services have got a great attitude to try and supporting their people, all services. What it does do is help us get a national benchmark. So while some services have got some behavioural frameworks, and we've all been using some behavioural framework or another, what it will allow us to do is get a sense of benchmark about the types of things we should be looking for in our leaders. It allows a better exchange between services when people are moving, but it also allows us to design things like middle managers programs, more senior leadership programs, because you're adopting the same sorts of behaviours that you're looking for. So it allows for easier design and easier exchange of information about what you're doing around leadership. So it allows that kind of transfer of intellectual property to a certain extent, because you've got the same sort of bedrock in your organisations. That said, lots of people are doing fantastic work, but as ever, it needs refresh every now and again to get people thinking about what are we not doing and how do we do it better. Each individual service can do, as with all national products, a choice of things. It can either wholly adopt it, or it can tweak it to a certain extent because it's got its own particular value set or a certain language that it uses, and that's important. It needs to feel something that can be sensible for that service. Some services have already got their own behavioural framework because they've been doing some internal work already, and all we're asking is that they look at that benchmark with a national framework and say, does it have similar behaviours that you'd expect to find? Not least, for instance, in the national framework, we've been working with people like Mind, who've endorsed the language within that framework in terms of its inclusivity and well-being. So that's important to make sure that that's an echo in any framework that somebody may have. So in terms of rolling it out, we expect each service to look at that. And then what we'll do nationally is make sure that we're talking to all the HR directors, organisational development people, about any support they need to make sure that they can bed it in really effectively.